Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Classic Live Album War. Today we've got an extra special guest. He's back yet again. Let me welcome JY, Mr. Jeff Young himself.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello out there in Radio Land.
Radio Land and YouTube Land, right? I guess you can call it either or, whatever, out in Media Land, right? Multimedia land, social media land, whatever you want to call this thing we're doing. So we've got two very, very cool albums today we're going to be talking about. Two classic live albums by two really great American bands. Call them hard rock bands, commercial rock, whatever you want to call them. We're talking about REO Speedwagon, You Get What You Play For, okay? And then Journey's Captured. Two pretty popular American bands, and, arguably, when these albums were released, these live albums were released, neither band had really kind of hit their zenith yet as of that time, but both shortly afterwards would be mega bands, right? So we're going to have Jeff kind of kick us off and talk a little bit about the REO album. Maybe there's some folks out there who haven't heard this live album. If you haven't, you're missing out. Some good stuff, and this is pre their big album, High Infidelity, just right before it.
True that. Well, this album has a ton of nostalgia for me personally. I got to rank it up there with my top live albums. I don't usually rank 1 to 5 or 10, but your desert island live albums, I got to put this on here. I remember the first time my buddy turned me on to this record, and it's kind of one of the soundscapes of my childhood, and just the songwriting from the first track, Keep Pushing, 157 Lakeside Avenue. There's so many amazing tracks on this. It's just one of those albums, I think, if you're going to have a barbecue, a cookout, I know you have the beautiful setup over where you are in the Sea of Tranquility, Pete. And have some friends over. I think this is an album that I would put on, and it really sets a mood. And there's just something about this certain arrangement of songs on this record, the set list. And again, for people who only know REO Speedwagon, like High Infidelity forward, this album will probably come as a shocker. And I would urge people to go back, because I really followed this band a lot. I got to see them live on this tour, and followed them really heavy up to the 9 Lives album. They kind of lost me after that, and I think this is a good example of what happens to a band when you have a little bit too much corporate interference and a little bit too much quest to get on the radio.
Yep, it happens a lot. Yep.
For me, it's like two different bands. You listen to this band, and really they're one of the first jam bands. If you listen to this album, you can hear the prototype for all the bands, Fish, Mo, a lot of bands that came after. And this, any jam band fan would love this album.
Which is probably going to surprise a lot of people watching this who are like, but I only know like Keep On Loving You and a couple other tunes, that jam band, hard rock band. What are you talking about? And I think that's a very important point. A lot of those albums pre-High Infidelity are just really good Midwestern hard rock albums. And they had some sensational players in this band. And I don't know, Jeff, maybe you agree, for those who maybe are not familiar with the early REO Speedwagon catalog, this is basically a greatest hits live for the most part, right?
Yeah. And again, there's just something, and I got to compare and contrast it with Journey, and we can do that a little bit later after you talk about that. But in their songwriting, there's just something so earnest and like down to earth and real about the presentation of this particular set of songs on this album, how it's recorded, the fidelity, the album cover.
Yeah, the album cover is great.
Yeah, everything about this record just puts it right up there with Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy, and Strangers in the Night, UFO, and all my favorite live offerings.
Well, that's what a live album should be. And I think also for me, because I'm pretty familiar with their early catalog, and we've been saying it a lot on some of these classic live album shows. For me, a great live album is one that has the definitive versions of some of those great studio tracks. Okay, so here, we've got Keep Pushing is absolutely amazing on here. Only a Summer Love is amazing. Riding the Storm Out, the definitive version is this version on this album. Golden Country is great on here. Like You Do. So many really, really great songs that take those really great studio renditions. Okay, they were great on the regular albums, but put them in this live setting and they're even better. So, and I'm sure Jeff will agree with me on that. And you've got just some really great players in this band. And I think one of the most underrated guitar players of all time in Gary Richrath, may he rest in peace, who left us not long ago, I think was one of those players throughout the 70s and the early 80s that was one of the guys that should have been, a lot more famous and known as the great musician that he was. I know Jeff is a big fan of Gary and his playing, and some really tasty Les Paul licks on this album, I think. Some great solos, too. Underrated guy.
For sure, for sure. I could have had the guitar be a little thicker, the tone on this record, but his playing, I'm looking at the set list right now. I pulled it up. Just from the opening track, the mood of it, Like You Do, Lay Me Down.
Yeah, Lay Me Down is
Any
great.
Kind of Love, I love it. Amazing. Keep Pushing. You mentioned that. Only a Summer Love is amazing. And there's just some really long solo tangents that Gary Richrath takes. It's just, and we're talking Neil Schon here on the other. I'm one of my favorites, but we got Flying Turkey Trot, his solo.
Yep.
And I said Lakeside Avenue. I'm on a Rush tangent, but it's 157 Riverside. I knew that.
It was a block away. No big deal.
It's an amazing tune, the Riverside Avenue. And then what do we got for the encores here?
What do you got? Music Man, Riding the Storm Out, Golden Country, and my CD doesn't have Little Queenie. Little Queenie they left off. I know the LP had it.
Well, that's for my money because, again, I think if you got your lady on a Sunday afternoon, like we're sitting right here, sitting out by your pool, Pete Pardo, with your Huskies.
That's right.
Having your friends over for some pints. I think this is the album that's going to do the trick for you.
Yeah, it's a very accessible album. And I think I was looking before. I believe this live album eventually went platinum. Took a couple of years, but then I think if it was released like 3 years later than it actually was, probably would have been a huge seller, right? Because they hadn't yet started riding that high wave of the High Infidelity album. But a classic. I agree with Jeff. It's great. It's underrated. And if you haven't heard this particular live album, or maybe you haven't heard any older catalog of REO Speedwagon, this is the first one to check out, I think.
As a segue over to you, tossing the baton to the Journey Captured. And I love that record. I love Neil Schon. Even as I was listening right up until the time that we signed on here today, am I really putting REO Speedwagon ahead of the legendary Journey with all their epic hits? And there was just no comparison as I listened to the albums back to back. And I'm not a big fan of the fidelity on the Journey album. And it's a little harsher, a little sandpapery texture for live. Live albums, it's a sticky wicket getting the audio correct. And, I love a lot of the songs. I think I would have been more for the Journey had there been more tracks from the first 3 Journey albums.
Yeah.
How about some... Oh no, I'm Not a Spaceman, something like that. Tossed in there.
Yeah, I hear you. Still a strong live album. And again, here's the great cover, right? I think
Scarab Beetle. They got the Scarab Beetle going there.
That's right. I was big into this when this first came out because I was just starting to become a big Journey fan, and I remember. I guess if you were a Journey Steve Perry fan first before you kind of dove into those first couple of albums, it's hard not to love this. So, and I think too, it also signaled really the end of Greg Raleigh's tenure in the band, right? Such an important person in this group. And I think Where Were You, Just the Same Way, absolutely great on this album. Line of Fire, you got Lights, Stay a While, Too Late, a really cool song, The Dixie Highway, which they never did anywhere else. That was not a studio track. They played that on this tour. Feeling That Way is great on here. Again, the dual vocals of both Steve and Greg, perfect. Anytime, Do You Recall, Walks Like a Lady, La Doo Da is pretty scorching on here. And then, of course, you got Love and Touch and Squeezing, Wheels in the Sky, and Any Way You Want It. All done really well. I really like the Wheel in the Sky in this album. And then they threw like a studio track at the end, The Party's Over, Hopelessly in Love, which I dig that tune a lot. So I agree with Jeff, probably not the best sounding live album of all time, but I think it's the performances are really, really strong. And if you're a Neil Schon fan, he's pretty ripping on here throughout the whole thing. I mean, you got
blistering.
Oh yeah.
And I like his tone because like later on, I think he's got a little bit too much echo and spacey thing, and it's hard to hear some of his fast stuff. But on that album, I think it's pretty thick and crunchy. I think if Gary had that tone on the REO.
Ooh, yeah. But two great players, two great players, two great live albums. And I guess we've come to the time in the show, Jeff, where I think you've pretty much already done it. I think Jeff favors the REO album.
Look at that. Look at it. It's just poignant from the heartland. Just like you really feel them like pushing and like really trying to earn it through the whole show.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't listened to the full album in a long time, and that's what just kept rising to the surface to me. It's like, man, they're working, everyone's playing. There's just so many great passages and breakdowns and dynamics. I think it's a more up and down journey, more dynamic journey overall.
Yeah, I hear you.
Than the Journey album. And it's barn burning. I mean, Neil Schon's barn burning, and every song you named off that's killer. But
yeah,
I got to go for the nostalgia.
Well, I mean, and a lot of times with these live album wars that we're doing, it's more, I found anyway, it's more about which album you have the most history with, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. I mean, for me to pick one of these two, I like them almost equally. I'm probably going to go with the Journey album only because I have a lot more history with that. Just like some of the previous shows that, there's certain live albums that just really have spoken to you since, we were all kids. 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever it might be. And I have a little bit more history with Captured. But it's pick 'em. They're both so good, right? There's no right or wrong answers here, right? Neither album is better or worse than the other. It's just kind of like the connection that we all have individually with those live albums and those songs. So, yeah, two good ones. I think we both can agree. These are two winners that if there's anybody out here that hasn't heard either or both, now's a good time to go and check them out and listen to them and start to love them like so many of us have, throughout our lives. So,
folks who've only known the latter day REO Speedwagon really owe it to themselves to dive back and start with that record. I mean, that was the first REO album I ever heard. And then I dove back into their studio albums, and it's just a timeless opus there, that album, I think.
Yeah, I think
surprised a lot of people. The Journey, we expect that, and we know, and
right.
all the sounds sound like they sound. But when you dive deep into this REO Speedwagon album, you're going to be just blown back by the journey that they take you on. Yep,
it's quite good. And like Jeff said, if you have very limited exposure to the music of REO Speedwagon, you're going to listen to this live album, you're going to be like, whoa, I did not expect that at all, right? So, and that'll be a good thing. So check them both out. REO Speedwagon, you get what you play for. Journey, Capture, they're both fantastic. You know the drill, guys. You're going to see that little balloon up in the upper right-hand corner with an eye in it. You're going to click on that. You're going to vote for either one. And also you can go on our Facebook page and vote on the Facebook page as well. So we'll see how far in the tournament who becomes a live album champion, right? So will Journey or will REO move on to the next round? We shall see. All depends on what you guys put in. So anyway, Jeff, why don't you tell everybody kind of what's going on with you, where they can find you, and all that kind of good stuff.
Got a brand new transmission of Music Without Boundaries happening Tuesday night at 7:11 East Coast time, 4:11 West Coast time, and whatever time it is, wherever you are on the planet. Really cool show. We're going to probably have to blast some REO Speedwagon. You get what you play for.
I think so.
And on this show, and some other surprises. I'm actually heading in the studio here end of this month with my singer from Australia. Her name's Hells Bells. We have a band called Fleshy, and we're going to be dropping our first single on October 11th. It's called In the Flesh. And we hope that you'll check out our Facebook page is fleshymusic.com, and our YouTube channel is facebookcensorsourBand.com, because there's a little controversy with that band name. Apparently American algorithms don't really understand what fleshy means, but
too sexual, Jeff, too sexual.
A little
I guess.
Tip of the hat to Queen. Fat bottom girls make the rockin' world go round, people.
Sounds good. Well, we're all looking forward to that. Waiting for new music, and the new music is coming, so it'll be awesome.
You've heard it.
I've heard it. I don't want to give too much away to anybody,
It's
but
heavier and punkier and proggier than people expect, right?
Yeah, it's good. A lot of good hooks too. An amazing singer. Jeff's added some great guitar work. It's a good combination. So you were all in store for a treat when they start releasing these tunes. So we're looking forward to Fleshy. And Jeff, thanks again for joining us. Jeff's coming right back. We got another classic live album war show coming up. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you real soon. Take care, everybody.
Bon voyage.